Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. It is time for our monthly edition of What's New at Ancestry. This is for May 2017. Now, some of you who follow along may remember that I was actually out on vacation the first couple of weeks of April. And so that means there was no What's New edition in April. So this month we're going to be covering 2 months worth of content updates, and we'll do that right after we talk about the upcoming events. Let's go ahead and dive into that. For those of you who are interested in furthering your genealogy education, there are a lot of really great events that are found all over the country in local and state and regional genealogy societies and conferences. You can learn more about those at conferencekeeper.org. That is a website where you can go and find out events all over the place, all over the world, really, both online, virtual, anything you could be interested in to further your genealogy education and to learn from some of the best genealogy educators around. The events I have listed on the screen are the events that Ancestry will be attending. And so Ancestry will have a booth, usually in the exhibit hall at each of these events. We have some of our employees, including myself, teaching classes at these events. And so it's a great opportunity to come and to meet with us. And I always love doing that. I just returned a couple of days ago from the New England Regional Genealogical Conference, and I had a great opportunity to meet some of you who I have known online for years and now finally get to put a face with a name. So if you're going to be attending any of these events, please seek us out. Let me just give you a quick rundown of some of them. The National Genealogical Society's annual conference, NGS, is going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina next week. So if you live local, you can certainly go online and see if you can register for the event. If you're not local, you might be getting down to the wire if you want to attend in person. But I do want to just highlight that they will be live streaming about 20 of the classes from that event next week. So if you would like to sign up for live stream for that event, you can go to conference.ngsgenealogy.org/livestream, and you can register there to live stream the events to your computer over the days of the event. Similarly, the Genealogy Jamboree, which is held in Burbank, California every year, it will be the 9th through the 11th of June this year. You can go to genealogyjamboree.com to learn more about that. It's one of my favorite events of the year. If you can attend in person, I highly encourage it. But if you can't, they also offer live streaming of their classes. So you can sign up for that if you can't attend in person. A couple of other events coming up here. The International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies annual conference will be in Orlando, Florida this year. Just a note that while registration for the conference still has plenty of room, the conference rate at the hotel where the event is being held is actually running really low. Wouldn't surprise me if there were not any conference rooms left available. There were just a couple when I last looked. So if you want to come to that event and you want to stay at the hotel where the event is being held, get online today and see if that's something that you can still get a hotel room for. Otherwise, you'll have to stay at a nearby hotel, which works. There's lots of people who do that as well. But just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And then FGS, the Federation of Genealogical Societies, they're an organization, they're a federation of genealogical societies from all over. That's going to be held in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania this year. That will be the 30th of August through the 2nd of September. Registration is now open for that and for conference rates at the local hotels that they have contracted with. You can go to fjsconference.org to learn more about that. So those are just some of the events, some of the major events that Ancestry will be participating in the coming months. I would love to see you there. If you'd like to look for more local educational opportunities, again, go to conferencekeeper.org. They've got some great calendar resources there for events all over. Now, let's talk about content. Like I mentioned, we did not do a What's New episode in April because I was on vacation. So we do have 2 months worth of content to catch up on. And taking 2 months worth of content and trying to boil it down to an acceptable and interesting list was really difficult because there's been a lot of really great things released over the last couple of months online. As a matter of fact, more than 92 million records in 2 months that have come online. So if you've never joined us for a What's New episode before, first let me just give you a quick rundown of where you're going to find what's new. If you click on search and go down to the card catalog, and then once you get into the card catalog, if you sort by date added, that will put all of the new stuff at the top of the list. We leave this new tag on for about 90 days, so you can go through and see what new records exist online. If you hover over any one of those databases, it will pop up a little box that tells you what date Ancestry published that on. So I kind of use that date to keep track of when I last checked. I try to check for new content every 2 or 3 weeks. And here's why. This is something that a lot of new people don't understand. Not every single record collection on Ancestry shows up in your hints. So we only provide hints to about the top 10% of our most popular databases. What that means is that there are 90% of our databases that you're never going to get a hint for. You actually have to search for. Now, when you click search from your tree, we do search all 20 billion plus historical records on our site, but the better thing to do, especially if you've already done a lot of research on a person, you don't want to wade through all those search results again, is to go into the card catalog. And if you see a record collection, like here's this collection of Germany Lutheran baptisms, marriages, and burials, there are 27 million records in this one collection. Now, I happen to have a lot of German Lutherans in my family tree, and I've done a lot of research on many of them. But it would be better if I could just go into this specific database to see if the records for the area where my family lived existed. So that's kind of how I use the card catalog and that new feature. Let me just run through some of the highlights of the record collections we have released. There is a new collection of New York Episcopal Diocese of New York church records. So if your family lived in New York and they were Episcopalian, between 1767 and 1970, there's going to be this collection of church records that are now available for you. Now, one of the things that you should know is that anytime you have a browse box, browse this collection, over here on the right-hand side when you're in a database, that means that Ancestry has images available for that particular collection. I always check the browse box to see if the location I'm interested in or the time period and location combination is represented in these particular records. So for example, if I had family who were from Scarborough, and maybe they attended St. Mary's, and I know that, or maybe I don't know where they attended church, but that they lived there between 1897 and 1904. Now I can see the records for this location and time period exist in this database. Now I could just click on that and it would take me to the set of images for that specific location and time period, and then I could browse through them one at a time, just like I would a reel of microfilm. You'll see here, I've got some image manipulation things. I can come in and make the images smaller or bigger. I can page through one image at a time and read the information that's contained in these particular records. Or, now that I know that that particular location is included here, I could just come in here and I can type in Scarborough, and I can spell it correctly. Let's see, Scarborough. There we go. And then I can select it from the type ahead list. There are Scarborough places all over the place. Okay, here we go. And then I can just do a search with that location and whichever surname I want. Now remember, when you're doing database specific searches, sometimes the less is more principle works best. Also remember that the name is oftentimes the singular, most misspelled, mistranscribed piece of information on a record. So sometimes it's easier just to do a search for a specific year or a specific range of years and a location, and then narrow your way down from there based on the information you discover is included in that particular index. So new databases, I always play around with them a little bit just to get a feel for them, so that when I actually do a search, my searches are a lot more effective, a lot quicker. So that's the New York Episcopalian records. We also released a huge collection of Ireland city and regional directories. These date from 1847 to 1946. So those of you who've used the U.S. City Directories collection, you know one of the benefits of the directories, well, there's several. One of them is that it fills in the gaps in between census years. Another is that oftentimes it gives you movements of families year over year. Another thing it provides for you is the opportunity sometimes to discover when somebody died. If you've got a husband and wife listed in a directory over and over and over and over, and then you just have the wife or you just have the husband, that gives you a range of time to look for a particular death record. So that's really important. City directories just are a great genealogical resource. For Ireland in particular, they're fantastic because of the bombing of the Public Records Office in the 1920s. There's not a lot of countrywide genealogical records available in Ireland, and so this is a super valuable resource because it gives us information that might not be available anywhere else. So those Irish records, again, you're going to notice a browse box over here that gives you some information about what exists and does not exist in a particular collection. So you can browse by year, and you'll see that you can see which years are available and what the title is that's available for that particular year. You'll notice that sometimes it's just for a specific location in Ireland, sometimes it's more broadly for a larger area. The other thing you can do is you can just come in here and do a search by last name or by location and see what exists for that particular location over time. So lots of great ways to play with those records and make some discoveries about your family history there. Now, let's go back to those Germany Lutheran baptisms, marriages, and burials. There's actually a few different collections. Now, the way Ancestry acquired these records, they're broken out in different ways. We have some, like this database, that are for a lot of Germany. And over here, you'll see you can actually discover that it's not just Germany even, because Germany, the boundaries for hundreds of years changed and fluctuated a ton. Germany, as we know it today, didn't become the country it is with the boundaries it has until just within the last 20 or 30 years. Before that, there was World War I and World War II where the boundaries shifted constantly. Prior to that, Germany became a formal country in 1867. Prior to that, it was a bunch of variant kingdoms. And so you'll see here we don't just have German records, there's also records for areas of Poland and other places that may have been Germany at one point, and that definitely had Lutheran as a prominent religion. So there were a large number of records in the churches for that particular area. So Germany sometimes encompasses different things. People always say, well, my ancestor lived in Prussia, and it used to be Prussia, and then it was Germany, and then it was Poland, and which country should I search, Germany or Poland? And I always say yes. You should search both, because you don't know where the records ended up. And sometimes the records go with the country that it becomes, and sometimes the records stay with the country it was. And so this gives you a view into some of those records. Now, the Germany Lutheran records, if I come in here to the card catalog and type in Lutheran, you're going to discover that one of the things that also happens with some of these records is they get broken out more regionally. So there are records for Hanover, almost 1 million of them, that also went online within the last couple of months. You'll see records from earlier releases that were broken out by Saxony or Berlin or Rhineland, right? So just, Baden, different regional Lutheran records. So keep in mind that if they're not in this large database that covers a large portion of the country, they might be in one of those more smaller regional databases, and getting yourself familiarized with those so that you can search those effectively is important. Now, one of the things I do have to remind people, and it always seems a little bit silly when I say it out loud, but they are Germany records, so they are usually in German. Ancestry does not translate the records. We do translate the field labels, so the things that we've indexed, you'll see English field labels for those, name, birth date, parents' names, whatever, but the actual record itself, the image, will be in the language of whatever that particular country is. Okay, a couple more things before we wrap up. We have this huge new collection of U.S. Army Transport Service passenger lists that date from 1910 to 1939. So through World War I, up until just before World War II. One of the things I just want to point out with this particular collection is the importance of reading the database description. So anytime you get to a new database, if you scroll past the search box, you're going to see a couple of things. One of them is going to be the source information about where Ancestry obtained these records. That helps you understand a little bit more about the provenance of the records. You'll see links there sometimes to the record group, in this case at the National Archive, where you have their complete catalog description and information about how they obtained these records. Below that source information, you're going to see a database description. That database description provides you with information about what's in the records, because the thing is that most of the records we use, as a matter of fact, almost all the records that we use, were not created for genealogical purposes. So understanding why they were created helps us understand the records so that we're interpreting them correctly. And by interpreting, I don't mean one language to another. I just mean understanding the information on the record in such a way that we can analyze it, that we're drawing correct conclusions about the people in the records. That's a really critical part of the genealogical proof standard, is being able to analyze and correlate the data on records, that we're coming to correct conclusions, that we know that the person that we're looking at really is our person, not just somebody that has the same name and may have lived at the same time in the same place. So these database descriptions are really important in helping you understand more about the records so that you can analyze them correctly. Again, you've got a browse box, so this particular collection has images, and you can start to understand a little bit more about the collection, or you can just dive in and start doing searches. I sometimes will search for something generic the first time I search a new database, just to see how the records are organized, what kind of information is going to come up on a particular record, so that I can understand when I start searching how I should be searching, or how information is recorded, or what I can expect to find. So that's a really exciting collection of records for those of you who may have had family members who served in the Army in particular, but also just in any branch of the military, because this was the Army Transport Service. So the Army was the one transporting troops and supplies and things around, and so they didn't necessarily have to be in the Army to avail themselves of the Army Transport Service. Okay, last collection I want to talk about today is the Iowa Delayed Birth Records. These are for births that occurred between 1856 and 1940. Now, you may see this sometimes in a lot of different states, so I just want to give you a little heads up about what delayed birth records are. Delayed birth records typically are somebody who was born and there was no birth record ever recorded, and that's super common prior to 1900 in the United States. However, there may have come a time in their life, later in their life, when they needed a birth record because they were applying for a passport, because they were applying for a social security number, because they were trying to get into the military. Whatever the case may be, they may have needed some kind of a birth record, but there was no birth record recorded when they were born. So they might be 18, they might be 25, they might be 85. It doesn't matter how old they are at the time they need the birth record. They have to then go back and prove that they were born in the time and place that they were born. So delayed birth records are records that might have been filed in 1956 for a birth that occurred in 1896, and they would have to provide some kind of an affidavit from individuals who were there at their birth. So a parent could provide that, or a midwife, or an aunt, or somebody who was there at their birth. They might also have to provide, any other kind of evidence. So a family Bible, a copy of a family Bible page, or, lots of different ways you can prove that particular birth. And so delayed birth records are simply birth records that were created after the event for a birth that occurred before. Now, that's important to understand because birth records typically are viewed as an original source for primary information. So a birth record is an original source, but is it now primary information if it's something that happened years later? Well, if it's the mother who's the informant, you can probably call that primary information, but knowing that she might be providing this information 30 years after the event is important in how you analyze that information and again, come to correct conclusions about what to put in your family tree. So always pay attention to the records on the information, not just the record, the indexed information, but also click through and view the image wherever possible. In this case, we do have images. And you'll notice here also it gives you tons of information about how to analyze this record. So here in this instance, we've got Charlotte May Allen, we've got her date of birth, her place of birth, her parents' names and birthplaces. She has signed the record. That's always amusing, right? This is a birth record and she's signing her own birth record. Well, it's because it's a delayed birth record. It provides her address. Here you can see when she applied for this. So this particular record was applied for in July of 1956, but she was born in 1901. So she's 55 years old when she's applying for a delayed birth certificate. Then there's this section on these delayed birth certificates that lists the evidence, the supporting evidence that they used, and that's a word that genealogists should become really familiar with, right? How do you know what you think you know about the people and names and dates and places you put in your family tree? Well, in this case, she has a marriage record from 1925 and a marriage record from 1950 where she said, this is when I was born on each of those records. And so they're using that as the supporting evidence for her birth date. So what that tells me is that she's the one who has provided her birth date. Nobody else, like there's no mother or midwife or anybody who was there at the event. So it could be wrong, and that's something to keep in mind. Sometimes people didn't know their own birth dates. That's not an uncommon thing, but she's been consistent. When she was 24 when she got married, she gave the birth date. When she was 49 when she got married, she gave the birth date. Now here she is 6 years after that second marriage, applying for a birth certificate. She's giving that same birth date and providing those marriage records as the evidence. What this also tells me is that there are two marriage records that exist. So not only is this a delayed birth record, but there's also some evidence here of two marriages and details, in this case, a certificate number of the second marriage. This is a county and a date for the first marriage, so that's a clue that leads me to more records about this particular individual. The other thing on here you're going to notice is that she signs this as Charlotte Smith, which tells me that in 1956, her last name was Smith, even though she was born under the name of Allen. So delayed birth certificates are delightful because they provide great information. You'll notice here, not only does it also provide her parents' names and information there, but it provides information about how old they were at the time that she was born. So great information available on these delayed birth certificates, but also you need to recognize that they are provided after the fact, not before. Well, that is all I have prepared for you today. Like I said, it took a lot to pare down 2 months worth of record collections, and so I just gave you the highlights. I would encourage you to go spend some time with the card catalog, look through some of the other record collections that have been released over the last couple of months. You might find some gems in there that will help you further your family history. That's all I have prepared for you today. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.